Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here on the channel. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And today I have a very special guest, one I have been dying to have on the show for quite a few months now, and I'm so excited to finally have her on the show. She's a 26-year-old storyteller who writes a fictional and character focused series for adults about otherworldly survival and discovery. She has been writing her entire life so far, with some favorite parts being drafting dialogue and connecting components of a story as a narrative puzzle. She released her fantasy debut, Carriers of Eunoia. I probably butchered that, I apologize. In 2020, that was based on a 2015 dream. Each year since, she's been expanding the universe with a new character, standout, and theme with echoes of Eunoia and its sequel, Powers of Eunoia, as the trilogy, prequel, and finale. Faction Realms Press is an independent, self-publishing imprint my guest created in 2022 to share stories globally. She brings her story to life with the help of commissioning other creators for artwork and editing along with those who support her. She is mostly either working, writing, gaming, or listening to music. And being within the realm of fiction is her favorite thing, and it's where she can spend an eternity in. Her upcoming title, The Shadow of Salt Crest, a beat the clock blend of science fiction and fantasy about finding a magical key, it's set to release later this year, December 1st, 2024. And also, this guest is very special to me because she was one of the first people who pre-ordered my copy of Michael, Last Angel of Earth, as well as getting her digital custom print. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to fellow author Daze Evander. Daze, it is so nice to finally have you on the show.
Yes, it's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. And I really enjoyed connecting with you on Instagram so far. I look forward to also reading your book, Michael. I pre ordered that one and that came in. So, yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So, before we dive into your background as a writer, is there anything else you'd like to share about your history? Any other tidbits about your life growing up, or will we find that out later in the questions?
I'll just give a little overview. So, I've been interested in creative writing my entire life so far. When I started as a child, I would, create like little poems and mini short stories about nature and creatures and things. And then when I ventured into about high school, and that's when I kept writing poetry mostly and writing a lot that focused on emotions and relationships, interpersonal conflict. Those are things I wrote about a lot when I was growing up. And I also just loved fiction in general. I especially loved watching like TV shows, movies, and I would daydream all the time. So I would, as a kid, I spend entire days sometimes daydreaming. I remember like working ahead in my homework so I'd have more time to go spend with characters in my head. So yeah,
Nice.
I'll dive more on that later. But yeah, I've just always gravitated towards fiction and just being within that realm.
Okay. And as a little intro into your works, what can you tell our viewers and listeners about your series that you have been working on, as well as a little preview for your upcoming one later this year?
Yeah, so I debuted with Carriers of Eunoia, and I have the paperbacks right here. So this is my first
Ooh,
one.
nice.
And so this is based on a dream about the power of the mind. And so I was especially inspired by the TV show Lost when it came to this trilogy. I remember when I watched that show, I loved the diverse cast of characters and how every episode focused on a different backstory for all of them. And so there's other media that also inspired me, but I just remember feeling like, it'd be really fun to do my take on this. Like, what's my take on a rotating cast of characters,
Right.
set set in this fictional. You can do anything in fantasy. It's what I love about it. And so I was like, okay, let's see what I do on this. And I had this dream, and the dream was it consisted of the 6 main speakers of this book. And so since then, every year I've just been building on it. Echoes came out 2021, and so this is the direct sequel to Carriers.
Okay.
And then Powers is the finale and also the prequel for the trilogy. And so this one came out 2023. And
nice.
So these are all based on the power of the mind, though, because I take this cast of characters and they're exploring this planet called Eunoia. And
okay.
yeah, so the word Eunoia, it means well minds, beautiful thinking. Also means the goodwill that a speaker cultivates between them and their audience. So since it's all based on the power of the mind, and what I kind of mean by that is not just the interpersonal conflict that each character is facing. So you're actually stepping into their points of view, but also the planet that they're walking on has a consciousness of its own.
Ooh.
Is a character. The planet is a character. So, and that unfolds, as you get deeper into the lore. So it starts, it's a slow burn. So it kind of starts, we started this crime scene with Amira, and she's the character who's on the finale, but she was also the first character I ever created. And so, she's really
okay.
special to me. And so it starts there, and then it starts opening up, and the lore has just been building since then. So my next book that comes out in December, The Shadow of Salt Crest, that is going to be a spin-off of the trilogy. Although it's not required, like you don't have to read the early books to start the new story because it begins a whole new narrative. But there's extra lore that gets built on from my original books. So, but yeah, The Shadow has a new theme. That one it's actually takes place on Earth, which is really cool and exciting too. And it takes place in this fictional city called Salt Crest, and that is a dystopian, also a survival, rotating 6 points of view, first person characters. And yeah, so but my books are very emotionally driven. They're very character focused, and they have a lot of otherworldly creatures and the magic system. It's, I would say, unpredictable in the sense of you just really don't know what's going to come next. Sometimes it's as I'm writing it, I'm like, what's going on? So yeah, it's always keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Awesome. Now I'm curious, Daze. Now you mentioned before that you've been writing poems, in high school, and you're always are fascinated in creative writing. So where was sort of like the spark, the aha moment, so to speak, where you realized this was something that you wanted to pursue, potentially full-time, to be a full-time writer and to dedicate your efforts and your time in your stories and expanding your craft?
I would say that aha moment was with my first book. Once I first saw that paperback in person and held it in my hands, and I was like, wow, it's possible to make dreams a reality. It's possible to have just an idea and then get that into, someone's hands. They can experience it as well. And so I had the idea for that book in 2015. I started drafting it back then. I think I was around 17 years old, and I'm 26 now. So I started it back then. But due to some personal stuff going on in my life, it was a hard time in my life, emotionally and mentally. And so I kind of had it on the back burner. So I remember I woke up. So I had this dream, right? I had this dream of the 6 main characters. I was like, I got to write this down. Because it was just so crystal clear in my dream what they all looked like, what the planet looked like. So I woke up, and on my phone, I just typed out what became pretty much the first 3 chapters. And so I typed all that out, and I kept it on my Google Drive for almost 5 years. And during that time, I got really into video games, watched a lot of shows, had a lot of life experiences, and a lot of stuff that helped me. When I went back to that draft in 2020, it helped me flesh it out and turn it into the what the dream was supposed to turn into. And so, yeah, I think once that I actually made that a tangible reality, like it first came out as an ebook, and then I put out the paperback on Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. But once actually, I held it and I got to see that art in person and got to touch the cover. And, I've worked with such amazing people who've helped me make this, reality, and that support. It's also the support of others that, helped me believe in myself. Even, even the times when I didn't, the times that I had imposter syndrome or I was kind of doubting myself.
Mm.
There's, my support system. They have just been amazing. And there's some people, that have been with me since I started all this in 2020 that are still here and still tune in, even when I've taken breaks from social media. So yeah, I think that was like the spark, was just, wow, I can visualize this, and that is something that I can put into this reality, and
Hmm.
translate it to others.
Nice. Daze, you kind of said exactly almost that happened with me with my first book, The Gathering.
Yeah.
And we actually aren't that far off. So you said that you began this in like 2015.
Yeah.
I began The Gathering in 2018. It's only 3 years apart. And I was working on that during my undergrad. And I put that on hold for about 2 years before I went back into graduate school. And of
Mhm.
course, when the quarantine happened and lockdown, the only thing I could do was write, and
Yeah.
boom, I got the first draft taken care of, and then I started writing the spin-off slash, not really a sequel, but it's technically the second book in this series, where
Mhm.
it's a character-driven story. So yeah, you and I are pretty much of the same mind in that regard. And now I'm curious. So now let's fast forward ahead to 2020. So you now just looked at the draft on your Google Drive and you decided, okay, I'm going to finish this story. I'm going to expand the world. Two things. Number one, did you have any goals in mind with bringing the story and series to life? And two, what were the needs you wanted to satisfy for your prospective readers in the future?
I wanted people to feel seen in different aspects. Representation, of course, is extremely important to me, and having a diverse cast from all different walks of life, different backgrounds socially, but really, especially my trilogy, it focuses a lot on the difference in people's personalities, their
Mm,
insecurities, their strengths, their weaknesses. So, as writing all these different characters, I, especially as the author, wanted to make sure that nothing seemed biased. It didn't seem like I clearly liked writing one character more than the other. I wanted
right.
to feel fair in like the screen time, so to speak. I like to make sure that it's well dispersed amongst the cast, and that, you know, as a reader, it's like, there's this cast of, well, there's 12 points of view, but there's more supporting characters. But I wanted the reader to at least be able to maybe see themselves in one of the characters, or remind them of someone they know, or
Right.
maybe challenge their own perspective or see things from a different perspective. Because as I was writing the books myself, I was learning about the power of my own mind, the power of my thoughts, also my perspective on life. And so I went on a journey with the characters, and I think that because I did that, it's going to help the audience also feel like they're going on a journey, that, it's not being told what to think or feel. The audience gets to decide who's in the right or wrong. It's like, even
Right.
if there's some kind of like, there's an antagonist in the story, or there's that, I still wrote it where it's multi-layered. I like to lean into gray areas, where it's like,
Mm,
there's not a villain in my story and the hero. It's like, I always like to write it from, you can see this like 30 different ways. So sometimes you're
oh,
reading as
okay.
one character, and then you jump in the head of another character who opposes them, and then you jump into a third character who opposes both of them, and then the fourth one wants everyone to win, right? But they don't
Right.
even like themselves, so then they cause conflict. So it gets down into like the nitty gritty. I kind of call it a Rubik's cube. The trilogy is
Mm,
kind of like a Rubik's cube of all these different colors, and how does this all piece together and link together by the very end, which is also the beginning. And so I did a lot of creative writing courses in college when I got my associates, and then I did some English courses when I got my bachelor's. But in college, I kind of remember learning about the framing technique, and that sort of, when it's where it starts, where it ends, kind of that seamless loop, and like how reels are like that sometimes, like on the internet, when it reel ends, it starts at the beginning. And so like the trilogy, I kind of leaned into that, and like how can everything piece together, all the symbolism, all of the, I love foreshadowing. So characters
right.
especially in dialogue. They do that a lot in the trilogy. I like the first book. It's kind of like that saying, like, you know, when someone shows you who they are, it's the truth. And the characters are like that. They tell you in book one who they are and what's going to happen. And even though some of them don't even understand the power of their mind and their subconscious, and that they're kind of speaking things into existence with their beliefs, the reader gets to uncover all that, and they kind of get to decide who are they siding with. Because I've gotten a lot of mixed reactions, because I have some people tell me, oh, so and so is my favorite character, they're the best person you wrote, and then someone else is like, that was my least favorite character, I don't like them at all. And I've gotten like such difference of opinion, and I love that, because it's like, that's the real world, this is the life we live in. You know, there's difference in opinion. Some people are going to seem a certain way to others. It's
Right.
just so complex, and I love that. Like, the why do people do what they do, why do they think the way they do too, though, and how do they see their own selves? Because self-perception plays a huge role in, you know, switching the points of view.
Nice. And would you say that diverse reaction from your readers in a way validates your goal you set out with this trilogy?
Yes. Yeah, especially because one of my main inspirations behind telling my own stories like this is video games. And one game series in particular that I love is the Far Cry series. And I love
Mm.
how every game has a new location, a new villain. The protagonist was always such a unique, different character. And I was like, you know, I really wanted that. I was like, I want to run my own series where, you know, it's a new theme, we're in a new vibe, right? And you know, there's a new character standout for each title, which is just so fun. I just love characters so much. But yes, the mixed reaction, that's what I was hoping for. I wanted the characters to feel real. I want them to feel like real people. And when I write dialogue, it's very important to me that dialogue sounds realistic, that you truly could imagine someone would say that thing. And you know, it doesn't sound scripted. I wanted, you know, these characters to be candid, to put all of their flaws on display and all their strengths on display, so that the audience has a fair, you know, they have a fair choice of like, who's their favorite character. You get to see them in three different angles when you read all three books. Because like, I've had someone tell me like, oh, so and so is my favorite in your first book, but the second one they didn't like them, and then by the third they like them again. So it's, you know, I feel like that's kind of like real life, where, you know, sometimes there's conflict with people, or sometimes maybe our perception of them is different until we get to know them, and then we're
Right.
like, oh wow, we click so well. So yeah.
Nice. And going back to what you mentioned earlier about imposter syndrome, which I think is very important to discuss, especially for independent authors, because there is that sense of anxiety, that sense of nervousness when you present a work out to the masses, because it's not easy, ladies and gentlemen. As I said numerous times in other interviews, writing a book is not a get rich quick scheme. It can take years just to develop the first draft. And from there, it's editing, marketing, which is probably the most difficult one, finding a cover artist, finding a company that will format your book, whether it's Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and also getting the ISBNs, which that is a whole nother discussion, but it is a hassle. And
Yeah.
all of that sort of cultivates into this sense of anxiety and imposter syndrome. And we combine these two questions together, Dave. So when you made the decision to publish your work, initially, did you want to go the route of traditional or indie, even though I kind of know the answer to that? But even during that thought process, I imagine the anxiety imposter syndrome was present at that moment in your life. What disciplined you to say, no, I'm going to do this? This is the right path for me, and I know the kind of author that I want to be.
I would say the community of it all. So, um, also firstly, like, the desire I had to globally be a storyteller. That's always been my dream since I was a little girl. Was overall, I wanted to have my own TV show, like to run a show, be a showrunner was my ultimate dream. And so,
Right.
you know, this is what I can do. Like, this is a series I can produce, and you know, being indie and getting to have such creative control over the project overall was important to me, to stay true to the dream and stay true to the vision I had. But also, you know, I think that the moment, to be completely real, the moment when I was like, this is going to be published no matter on my hard days or the days I doubt myself. When I first saw the draft of the cover and on Carriers, and when James, my cover artist, sent that to me, and I was like, there's no turning back. Like I was like, there's no turning back. Like this is now, or it's existing, or it's in the world. Like I was just like, once I, started getting that down on digital paper, I was just like, I got to tell this, I owe it to the characters. Like even on the days where I want to go hide or archive all my posts on Instagram and not be seen, I was like, I owe it to these characters to tell this story because they went through a lot. And I feel like there's a lot that inspiration that people can have from this story. But it's also standing behind all this amazing artwork, all of the days that my family and my friends and, when people have encouraged me and given me those words of support, it's staying strong also for them and the belief that they've had in me as well. And so, but yeah, when I saw that cover art, and I was just like, it was just so cool. It was so cool to see, character from my mind really brought to life, and that I have a team, I have this team of people globally that help me bring these stories to life. And it's even on those hard days, I remind myself like this whole project, this universe is bigger than me. It's like sometimes I feel like I'm pretty much, I'm observing it in my mind and I'm writing it down to share with this world. And like I feel like in a way these are events that have taken place somewhere else. I'm capturing it. Like I sometimes feel like I'm a closed captioning on a show I'm watching in my mind. And I kind of feel like subtitles the way I transcribe it. And I'm just writing what I'm watching. And, sometimes I do make this, narrative decisions where I change kind of how it's playing in my head. But overall, I try to stay very close to how I watch it in my mind. And, I kind of feel like I owe it to these characters to put their story out there, to do it to the best of my ability. And also because I just have a lot of respect for the arts as a whole. Musicians, performance arts. I used to do theater when I was growing up, and I just have so much respect for anyone who puts their stuff out there. Because as you said, it's not easy, but at the same time, I kind of love the adrenaline rush. It kind of feels like, right before a play is about to start,
Right.
and you're in the wings and that curtain's about to open, and you got everyone's got their hair and makeup ready, and it's the spotlight's about to be on you. And I love feeling that adrenaline for my cast of characters. I'm so excited to get share their stories, unfiltered, exactly as they want them told. It's very much what it is, and staying true to it, despite what people might think or assume. It's like my advice is especially stay true to your vision, because it's like trends will come and go. But if you stay true to what you really want to do as an artist, it's gonna age beautifully, because it's like you're always gonna stand behind your work and be like, yes, I'm so glad I stayed true to what I really wanted to do.
Definitely. And I actually touched on a question that I'll be getting to later. But before that, we're now going to go into the business side of being an author. Now, you already kind of answered the first part when you discussed, uh, going down the path of an indie author where you had, the creative control, that I want to do justice to these characters, that they went through just as much difficulty as I did bringing them to life. So now I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts on this, Daze. So whenever people think of like, publishing a book, they think, okay, you just publish a book and it's out there. There's a lot more to it. You really have to think of, okay, who is the audience and who is the reader? Because two are very different things. The audience, in a broad sense, is like the community. Yes, this book would be in the sci-fi fantasy, but what genre? A science fiction fantasy, because they have different subgenres for different groups of people. Some are bigger, some are smaller. And within those groups, you have the reader, which is very important because ultimately, these are the readers who are going to pick up our books and read it. And sometimes knowing the readership is important because I'm sure you would definitely agree, Daze, that you probably have read some books that were geared towards this target audience for this readership, but upon inspecting, it's like, this needed a little bit more edits, or this was completely marketed. So what are your thoughts on that, knowing your audience and also knowing your readership?
Yeah, I'll be completely honest, because this is really a big part of my journey so far in discovering the business side, the marketing. As you stated earlier, it's not easy to market.
Mm.
And with so much content these days, and so much social media platforms and technology changing every minute, it's like, whoa, there's so much to stay on track with. But with this question specifically, what I would say is, when I started marketing this, I had no idea what I was doing in 2020.
Right.
I didn't barely use social media because of anxiety and imposter syndrome. So I was very, I didn't show my face or anything. I would just post the artwork, but I didn't really interact with anyone. I didn't follow anybody. I like wasn't in the writing community. I didn't let myself even go into the community because I was just like, I don't know, I'll just stay over here in my comfort zone. Um, and so for I think almost like 2 years, my Instagram was kind of inactive. Like
Mm.
I would advertise, but I wasn't in the community. I wasn't, participating. So it was like I was kind of on the outside, jumping in sometimes. And then I would delete my account when I'd overthink, and then I'd reactivate it before it was gone. And I was like, I needed to break that cycle. And that was how it was with my first two books. I barely had an online presence for up until Echoes of Eunoia. And then with Powers, I still hardly use social media until a bit later. And with this last year, I've been slowly pushing myself out of my comfort zone, posting more videos, trying to interact more and be present. And in doing so, it's been attracting my readership. It's been attracting
Right.
my tribe and the people that I align with. And it's true. It's like, when you're just yourself and you're not worried about it, you're going to naturally attract those that are meant for you. And I love what you mentioned. It's so important to talk about marketing the content correctly, because I'll be so honest, is that when I started marketing Eunoia, which was Carriers
Hmm.
and Echoes, I didn't know it was going to be a trilogy at first. I was just going to have it as like a duology. I was like, I'll just do these two. And I don't know if I'm going to write anymore. Deep down, I was like, I'm never going to stop writing. So, but, I kind of try to talk myself out of every book I would do. And then I finally accepted, like, okay, I put the infinity symbol. I'm like, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. Um, but at first, I don't think I inaccurately marketed it, but I didn't fully give what it's about. And
Mm.
it's like Eunoia is very emotional. And it's like I kind of was just on the surface level. I just be like, oh, it's about magical abilities and people fighting in an arena. And so some people compare it to Hunger Games. They're like, oh, this sounds like, um, Maze Runner and like other dystopian this and that, right? And I was like, by the same time, it's like I also, with this last year and stepping out more and seeing how important it is to share more about it, it's just like I want to be really open about that. These books are about mental health. Like the Eunoia trilogy as a whole is overall, it does bring awareness to mental health. And
Mm.
I think at the time I had a hard time mentioning it. One, because some of the subject matters that are explored they can be triggering, and
Right.
it's sensitive to talk about some of these subject matters. So I was hesitant on social media to mention these things. But then at the same time, it was like, it's important to, because I also want readers to know what they're getting themselves into. It's like, this is very emotional. There might be some triggers here for you as these characters explore different mental health. There's some mental health problems that some of them encounter and have to get through. And I think at the time I didn't mention it much because I myself was going through a mental health journey, and
Mm.
I myself was having to break down some barriers of, accepting myself and putting myself out there, but also overcoming anxiety, overcoming depression, and some self-esteem problems I used to have. And so it was hard for me it was easy to write about, right? But it was hard to market it because I myself, was going through my own journey of figuring out just how powerful my thoughts were. And then when I started to understand that as I went on the journey with the characters and I finished Powers, I had that behind me where I was like, okay, I think I also want to make this clear to people that this story is about mental health. So the power of the mind. And that's also what I mean by that. And so
Mm.
specifically, just to give a quick example, one of my main characters, his name is Ezekiel, and he's actually the character on the front of The Shadow of Saltcrest. So he's one of my original characters from my trilogy. He first appears in Carriers of Eunoia. And he's the second character I've ever created. So I made him in like 2015. And so it's cool that his book is now coming out almost 10 years later. But his story is very personal. He deals with a lot of suicidal ideations and having to overcome um, depression and grieving and mourning the loss of the love of his life. And
Right.
um, and so exploring that and bringing awareness to that is a huge part of his story in the trilogy. And so I kept that in mind, when I wrote The Shadow of Salt Crest. That story continues, and you get to see how does he overcome that? How does he move on after he's experienced feeling no hope for life anymore? And so, some of these characters, they get really deep in their insecurities or projecting. So some of them are very, they have these insecurities or these, hopelessness, but they're not even aware of it being projected onto other characters. And so it gets really intricate. But as I was, going through certain things in my life, I remember taking inspiration from some of the heartache, some of the life experiences. But I think what you said about marketing is very important to be
Right.
you got to market accurately. So it's like,
Mhm.
I was just kind of in my comfort zone and didn't want to step out of my shell. But at the same time, I want to bring awareness to mental health and to truly break down the stigma and the barriers that some people have around it. Because to me, it's like, it's just as important and, should be treated as discussing physical health as well. Because it's like, our mental health is just so important. So the books are really, they're about that. But at the same time, there's the entertainment, there's them having their super abilities, and all of that's in there, right? But there is also a deeper meaning that you can piece together when you read the trilogy on how it all links together and has a really deep meaning about what we think. And the wish carriers allude to that, like the power of our thoughts and speaking things into existence. Because I personally encountered it myself as I went on my own journey, especially this last year. Kind of taking a holistic approach to just changing my life, improving some things, stepping out of my comfort zone, and accepting myself. And mental health is a big part of that. And so, yeah, and opening up. Sometimes I just would open up on social media, like, yeah, I'm having some anxiety, but the people who've been so supportive and people, even though I've deactivated my account and came back, they still stuck around. And
Mhm.
it's truly, if it wasn't for those people, these books wouldn't even be here, because it's like the people that have stuck by me helped me believe in myself too. And it just, it goes to show how important communication is, how powerful our words are to other people. And so, for instance, so with Powers of Eunoia, so there's this artist who I was thinking about quitting writing, and I had my first two books out, and I had messaged and I said, thank you so much for allowing me to use your music for my advertising. It's meant so much, but I don't know if I'm going to do this, that kind of thing. And he was really encouraging, and he said he had started reading my early books, and he said he's enjoying them. And one thing he said to me, he was like, I'm sorry to hear this. I wish you would keep going with it. And that singular sentence like really inspired me. And when he said, I wish you would keep doing this. And it's a big part of Empowers, how in one of the scenes when the character says to another, I hope you make it home. In fact, I wish that you will. And when he says that to him, that light travels through his hand, and in the power of his words, he helps out the other man's future in their friendship. And honestly, this book like wouldn't fully be here without him. His name's Drawn to the Sky. He's a musician who's allowed me to use his music for advertising and everything. And that's a whole story. He's one of my favorite artists of all time. He's so talented, incredible. And his music just works so well with the books. But his encouragement, and I was just like, wow, that really did a lot for me. Just those simple sentences that some people would say, especially other content creators, people that create things, these other in this realm. I have such high respect for anybody who puts themselves out there in any capacity, because yeah, it's not easy. And in our power of our words, they do so much.
Definitely. And you kind of answered the next question I was going to ask, which is about networking, but you kind of hinted like a lot of people, especially like artists, both in the artistic world and also in the music world. So you kind of already answered that question, which then leads into probably the biggest one, the heavy hitter of all my questions. So here it is. And it's a very important one to discuss. So you and I both know being indie authors, it's not an easy thing. And definitely for first-time authors, I've been doing this now for 2 years, meeting a lot of different authors, learning about their experience. And what I've come to realize is that whether you go traditional or indie, there's pretty much two roads for an author. That is to be an author and be known as an author. And for me, in my opinion, to be an author is an individual dedicated to the art of storytelling and crafting worlds. Capital is not important, but it's nice to gain. To be known as an author is an individual dedicated to the art of marketing and building one's brand as an author and going on various platforms to share their book. Now, both have their own trials and tribulations. We have to go through the fires and the flames, a little Dragon Force reference, my fellow Rockheads. But I feel for first-time authors, the second road to be known as an author is the most tempting, but definitely leads down the road of unrealistic expectations. And I've come to this conclusion, which is this. No matter what your debut novel is, whether it's science fiction, fantasy, a memoir, a biography, an autobiography, whatever, that doesn't guarantee your legacy as an author. There are exceptions, of course. There are authors whose first works did give them that award-winning status, and kudos to them. But on average, the average indie author's first book is not going to get them, on the Pulitzer Prize or the New York Times best-selling list. It's a hard pill to swallow, but it is true. So, Daze, I turn it over to you. What is sort of your thoughts on this, discussion, which is, very important? And you kind of already answered this, so I'm going to tie it into this question, which is, besides helping authors realize that their first book doesn't guarantee their legacy as an author, but it should not stop them, what is your word to authors to help them understand this concept a little bit better and to, give them the right path or to guide them on a path that's more realistic?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. It's very important to discuss this in the writing community. So, for me personally, since I said as I've always been writing, I know it's always going to be a part of my life. Even if I had become an author or not, like if I never shared my story or not, I was always going to keep telling stories. I was going to have them in my mind. So I know when I debuted, it was a little hard for me at first to adjust to it because yeah, when you debut, you feel this pressure. You even create your own pressure of like book sales and am I doing ads right? And is this book going to go, is this first book going to go viral, or how do what, like, sometimes you or other people push that on you, or there's peer pressure, because I remember when I put my book out, it wasn't with the intention for my first book to go viral. I just loved the story. It was so fun to write, and I put all that effort in. I was like, I might as well share this with the world. And but I'll be honest, after around book two, I started, just to deal with that imposter syndrome of like, oh well, should I keep being an author or trying to be an author? What am I doing? Should I keep doing this? But my advice to people is something I'm told often by others is those two simple words: keep writing. Keep writing. No matter what happens, just keep writing. Because I can't tell you what's happened to me in the last few years when I wrote these books. And the thing is, and sometimes I talk to my past self and I'm like, thank you so much for no matter what was going on, you still committed to this in some way. Either it was writing 30 words or 3,000, or it was just working with an artist for the day, or it was just organizing my files on Google Drive for the project. I just stuck with it no matter what I was going through. It was a great day. It was a sad day. Some of the hardest days of my life. I kept doing it no matter what. And my advice also to people, and this is something someone in my family said to me when I put Carriers out. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to keep doing this though at first. And one thing that she said to me, one sentence, she said, "I think this is just the beginning." And that was so beautiful. And it really impacted me, because I was like, it's good to see it that way. It's good to see your first book as, and maybe later it will go viral. Maybe later people will read it and it, will get more traction. But I would encourage others, please don't get disappointed, and please don't get discouraged from your art. If you're not getting the reactions you think you might, or the amount of likes, don't worry about that at all. Stay true to the vision. But don't get discouraged, and don't, I'd say be proud of your accomplishments. Be proud, to be an author, right? Be proud of the title of author and storyteller. But also, be proud of yourself in that it's a continuous thing. I love to look at it as like the work never ends. It never ends. So it's like, even with the shadow coming out, right? It's like, woo, and I'm like, okay, on to the next book. Like, I'm on to the next thing, because it's no matter what, it's like time is always going to keep moving on. It's like, we have a great, let's say, like, this interview is great, right? But it's like, we can't live in this moment forever. It's going to become a memory, and we're going to keep building more memories. And hopefully I can come back to the show and do another one.
Definitely.
So it's like, I would encourage other writers, especially those just starting out, or they're going to have their debut book. Be proud of yourself. Don't get discouraged on low sales or anything like that, because it does not determine your worth as a creator. It does not determine the worth of your story. Also keep in mind, people have freedom of speech, and your story won't be for everyone. Nothing in this world is ever for everybody. So it's like, don't take it personally. And that's a big advice I would say, is don't take it personally how people react to your art or your characters, or even if they try to make it personal. It's just like, you're only responsible for your own behavior. And as an author, I think, even if someone has negative things to say about it, I look at it like they have their own right to their opinion and their freedom of speech. And so, generally I've gotten good reviews and feedback. Even for my debut, I was blown away at the 5 stars, and the reviews I got for my debut was past what I was expecting. I was shocked. I was so happy. People, those that I've talked to and seen, they've loved the debut so far. My second book didn't get as much traction, and so far it doesn't have many reviews. It was my first 1-star review, and I remember seeing it, and I was like, oh, I got my badge. This is a rite of passage as an author. It's gonna happen, and it's okay. It's like, not every story is for everyone. And I would just, I know it's said a lot in the writing community, but it's the keep writing, keep writing, keep writing. Like, no matter what happens, rain, shine, storm, keep writing no matter what you do. But don't force it at the same time, because I know sometimes writer's block hits, or you're like, you want to write, but it's like nothing's happening. And my huge advice also to other writers is, write when you're in the mood for it, right? When you feel that pull and inspiration, because your scenes that emotion is gonna translate to the audience. And I feel like the audience can tell when a scene is forced. They can tell when if you're not in the mood to write it. And I typically write my books out of order. It's like, I know the overall scope, but sometimes, like, I write the ending first, and then I write the beginning, then I write the middle, or I jump around. It just depends. And like, so that's one thing too, is I would just say to writers, don't be scared to break the rules. And especially as an indie self-published, you can do what you want. And like, so for instance, I just wanted to kind of do my own spin on things. Like, my ebooks are different than my paperbacks and my prints in general. This is just for the trilogy, not for Shadow. But for the trilogy, each book is assigned a different color code. So in the ebooks, when I do flashbacks and flash forwards, the text changes color to match what book you're in. And the characters, like, they light up who's speaking, kind of like in a video game or something. And it's, I'm not saying I'm the only author who's ever done this, or the first person to do it, but, certain things are not stuff you see mainstream. But it's just like, don't worry about what anyone might think, or like, well, technically you're not supposed to do this in a book. And I'm like, well, I want to, so what's going to happen? It's just like, I would say, stay true to what you want to do. Lean into what makes your story unique. And I do respect certain guidelines in publishing, and professional and doing this to the best of my ability, and all my funding, I fully fund these projects myself with the other job I have. So, I try to put all that I can into my funding, put all that I can into, the formatting and all that, right? And making sure that it's to the best of my ability, and it's gone through multiple revisions, and, definitely hire an editor, with however you can, make sure that other people, check the work and everything. But I think people should just really stay true to themselves. Don't worry about what others are doing or what's mainstream or what's just been done for many years, right? And what's very respected in literature. It's like sometimes it's okay to create a new type of storytelling and, like, just change it up, do something completely different.
Awesome. A perfect way to end this amazing author interview. Thank you all very much for joining us for another author interview here on the channel. I want to give a huge thank you to Daze for finally coming on the show. I'm so happy we were finally able to get this interview. Now, Daze, before we end, where can people find and engage with you on social media, and where can people buy copies of your book?
So right now, my only social media platform is Instagram. So that's at Daze Evander. And then my website is factionrealmpress.com. And my books, they can be bought on my website directly from me. That's right now only US shipping for ages 18 plus can order. And then they're also available on Amazon.com, Walmart.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and other retailers globally. So if you Google the Eunoia trilogy or Daze Evander or Carriers of Eunoia, you can see some other store options pop up online as well where you can get them from.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video. Thank you, everyone, for another episode. Thank you for all the love and support. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And as always, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wishing you all a wonderful day.